And we are live. What's going on Facebook and YouTube live? Today is Tuesday. Welcome to the Grind Define and First Row. You should know what it's time for. It's time for Taralyn, Michelle, and Billy Wroe live. We're getting ready to jump straight into it. Be ready. If I can remember what to click. And we back. I'm telling you, it's so strange how you can be like in a rhythm with things and then you take a slight, ever so slight break. And it's just like your brain doesn't even know where to go on the screen because that is what I feel like today. Anywho, we are here live with another edition of Taralyn, Michelle, and Billy Wroe Live. This is actually a panel edition. However, the panel is very small tonight, but that's okay. Anytime we can have a guest come on the show with us and join us for the show, it's always a pleasure. And tonight's topic, what we will be discussing, will be not that. I don't know why I didn't save. This is what I mean. This is exactly what I mean. I literally just typed it in. We will be discussing 1 second. I know the topic, but apparently my banner does not.
Listen, just imagine when there's like a holiday season off. It's going to be just a hot mess around these parts.
Right. Now I got to make sure I spelled things correctly. All right, here we go. Family ties. Thank you. My God. Tonight's topic is family ties. And as always, though, I do like to share what we think about the topics. How have you been? It's been a little over this is week 2. It would be week 2 since our last show. How have you been?
I've been good. No complaints. Sunshine over here.
Sunshine. No
I'm
rainbows.
a whole nother color. I mean, it's like that's my real color.
Wow, you out here for real in the sunshine. I'm walking on sunshine.
Right. Exactly.
No. Yes. Things have been there's been a lot of travel for me, so that was why last week just wouldn't have worked logistics wise to do a live show. Being in California, I had a lot of sunshine too. California had a heat wave, and so I got there and I think it was 111 degrees, and then unfortunately after that 111 it just went up to like 14, 15, and 18. So I was exhausted from the heat, but I'm happy to be back in Utah where it is a nice, I think 85 today was the temperature, something that I can handle. Because let me tell you, the next time it's a heat wave in California and it's 100 and anything, I'm getting a ticket to come back home. That's just what's going to have to happen. So anyway, jumping into tonight's topic, family ties. As always, what does this topic mean? I think we'll start with you tonight. What does this topic mean to you when you think about this topic, family ties?
Are they ties that you want to bind or ties that you should leave behind, or is there a middle? That's what I thought about.
Yeah, no, I actually maybe it's the context of family for me, but I think about the deep relationships that we forge in life, how those inevitably have become my family ties. And so like I have a very large family on both my mom's side and my father's side of the family. But the closeness that I have with those in my family is very sparse. There's not a lot of close ties that I have in my family. However, the relationships that I've developed over the years, whether it be people I went to elementary school with or people that I've been maybe coworkers with at one point and moved into deeper relationships as friends, those ties that I have, those are the family ties that I really lean on and really look at as family. Like I called one of my goddaughters today, it was her birthday. And to realize that she turned 20 years old. And it's like, wow, I've been in your life for 20 years because I've been here since you were born.
Yeah.
Those are those family ties that I think about. And then the other side of that, I do think about why I don't have the depth of ties to family that are blood relatives. And so that is some of that, those relationships that you let go. Do you want to be tied to them? Do you not want to be tied to them? And accepting and realizing that I have a choice in who I am tied to. So that's kind of where I think about when I think about this particular topic on family ties. Before we get too far into it, we do have our special panelist, JC, as I so lovingly refer to her as. I'd like to bring her up on the stage. Welcome, 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 JC. How are you tonight?
I'm getting it together.
Well, you look beautiful as always. It's so exciting to have you.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, so I know you were backstage, so I believe you could hear what we were saying. What does this topic of family ties mean to you? And I mean, me knowing you, you're definitely one of my family ties. So, what does this topic mean to you?
Well, I believe Taralyn said it the best. She said, "Are we tying? Or are we untying?"
Is it a middle? What are we doing?
Because when I think of tie, I mean, you can untie, right? I mean, you can untie your shoes, you can untie a knot most of the time. So, family ties. I mean, the word family is something that supposed to be defined by blood, but as we all know, it's just defined by relationship. So it's just relationship ties. And I'm curious to see where this discussion is going to go because sometimes it can be for the better, and sometimes it can be for the detriment of the soul. So,
Mm-hmm. And Billy, just in listening to you laying out what you were thinking about the topic, you asked the question. You wondered why the closeness that you have with some of your family members that are not family by blood, your external family, why wouldn't that be the same, or some of the complications that we may have with that when it comes to the biological tie? And I think that, and I've just come to this opinion. I think that a lot of it is because our blood relatives, they can't really see us beyond what they know of us. With family members, to some extent, you're not allowed to grow. And I think that the connection to the family, when you're one that is growing emotionally, spiritually, financially, when you're doing that outside of the box, the norm of what your family culture is, sometimes I think that our movement beyond what the culture is and how they know us to be, some of the mistakes that you made, relationships you've had, ways in which people feel like they were wronged, you moving in some ways, I think, convicts the people who are standing still for whatever reason, who don't have what it takes to move beyond a certain point, who can't see beyond what the family traditions, norms, and customs have been, who are stuck inside of a box that they don't allow themselves to get out of because it would mean doing something completely and totally different and trusting in yourself as opposed to that nucleus. I think that has a lot to do with it. So you staying confined inside of the traditional box is safe for everyone around you, kind of like the crabs in a barrel thing. It's safe for everyone around you. And if you stay within certain parameters, then it doesn't challenge anyone else to look at themselves and be able to step beyond excuses, be able to step beyond generational curses, be able to step beyond patterns. So I don't know. That's kind of how I've come to understand that. What say you? Oh, Billy, I can't hear you.
you're muted.
You're muted. Are you muted? There you go. It's only been a week. You better stop. You gone again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you are.
There. Okay, so here's the problem. I have two mutes. I have a mute on my screen and I have a mute button on my mic. And sometimes I hit the mute button on my mic, and sometimes I hit the mute button on the screen. And so I hit the mute button on the screen thinking I hit the one on the mic, unmuted on the mic by muting it, and then unmuted from there. It's a hot mess. Y'all gonna have to bear with me today.
But we love you though. That's all that
I
matters.
appreciate it. But from what you're saying, it's interesting because I was having a conversation with my brother earlier today, and we were talking about like being in this relationship of synergy, and like things that happen good for him, I'm happy for him in those things. And then things happen good for me, and I'm happy for him in those things, or he's happy for me in those things. And it creates this synergy that in some ways from our father's side of the family begins to separate us from the status quo of what that family is about. Like, unfortunately, on my father's side of the family, there's some people who have been, I'm going to say, inherently negative in their views on life, and not just about people, but almost like any situation, no matter what the situation is, they can find something negative in it. And it's like, I mean, granted, you can always find something negative, but you don't have to always be looking for something negative. And that's where the difference is. And so in having this conversation with my brother, we're talking about how having and creating this synergy also creates an example for our sons on what healthy support looks like, how you can not be at where somebody is at, maybe not be on the plane of perceived success that somebody is at in this moment, but be happy for their success and be just as driven to get to that success, that it doesn't have to be this competitive nature. There's only I call it a finite mentality. There's only so much success out there. So if I'm celebrating your success, that means that I'm also in turn celebrating the fact that there's no success left for me at the table. No, that's not where we're at. We're in a space where I'm celebrating your success with the understanding that my opportunity for success, whatever that may look like exclusively to me, is also on its way as well. And when we get there, we can celebrate that. So we spend more time celebrating, not complacently, but celebrating the successes that we have in our lives and valuing those versus being contentious or envious about the success of each other and others in our family.
Wow. JC?
You guys are so both of you guys have definitely taken the words out of my mouth, and so but the wheels are still spinning. And so, as each of you are talking, I'm thinking of, I'm seeing a ruler, I'm seeing a race, and I'm thinking like it's reminding me of moments where I grew up and there were 4 of us, and it was like, hey, if you didn't come and eat when the food was ready, you didn't get food, or you got whatever was left over. When the report cards came out, you were compared. Everybody sit down, let me see everybody's report cards, right? So when you think of the family dynamic, it's this constant, there's no surplus of anything. You're constantly fighting for attention or affection or food or acknowledgement. And it creates that crabs in a bucket type mentality where it's like, look at me, look at me. It's an unhealthy competition that we create in families. And if you're the first to do something, like Billy said, it's like, well, now I can't do it. Well, you can do whatever you want to do. There's enough for everybody. But for whatever reason, our parents have created just generations of family members that feel like there can only be one and there's no room for anyone else. And so we're constantly trying to outshine each other. I have a twin. And so this is like the story of my life where from the beginning of time, there was a ruler, right? Who's going to come out first? Oh, which way? Who's older? Does it matter? We was born on the same day. Who cares who came out first? But people constantly want to, who's taller? How come you look like this? How come she looks like that? And then it's just, our whole lives, the entire upbringing is just, we're supposed to mirror each other. And when we don't mirror each other, well, how come this one's better at that than that one? How come this one is prettier? How come this one is more talented? And we do this with our children. Well, this one's real good in sports and that one can't jump. And we create this hostile environment for kids to not really embrace each other and say, hey, it's great that you're good at this and I'm good at something else. That's okay. But in our mentalities, the way that we grow up, it's like you're either the athlete and everyone dotes over you as a young man, or you're a female and you're really really smart, or you ain't gonna be nothing. And so it's just this all or nothing mentality that we're groomed to be in from the time that we're young and fighting for our parents' attention. And that ruler is constantly there. Whereas when you meet a stranger, someone you don't know, there is no ruler. You don't know their upbringing. You don't know their background. You never had to fight for that person for the last taco or the last piece of chicken.
Right.
Oh, that last piece of chicken.
This fight.
And those are, man, that's, see, just in listening to you, that brings about, they say parenting doesn't come with a handbook, right? And I think that unfortunately, there are lots of parents out there. And before I even get into this, if you're just now tuning in and you want to join us on stage, come on, what you waiting for? There's a link that you can follow right there in the chat. And also, if you're liking what you're seeing, go ahead and share this broadcast. But I will say that so often, and I think I see this a lot with men and their sons. I'm not saying that moms don't do it too, but this is just my experience because I have 5 brothers, and then just witnessing the way my dad did things. There's so much with his sons, the climate that was created. It was kind of like you have those parents who try to live vicariously through their children. They don't even see who they are, what their gifts are, what their interests are, what their talents are. They've already decided, put a label on their head. You're going to be the this, you're going to be the that, you're going to be the this. And if, let's say, the child that's chosen to be the athlete, because that's what dad was, let's say that's not his forte, that's not his thing. So then there's an environment of competition that's created to make you into who I believe you should be. And so then you have all of that, parents living vicariously through their children, a lot of things that they grew up with that they can sit around and talk about how they don't like it, yet you're inadvertently, or maybe some of them intentionally, creating the same environment for them, which creates that whole generational thing. It's just so many different layers to that thing that takes and starts to write on the white walls that were once the kids' minds. Now you're writing on all of these different insecurities, all of these anxiety creates anxiety more than anything. So you have the insecurities, you have the anxiety, you have the inability to trust oneself. Because if this child is feeling like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, this is the direction that I'm going in, but you have a parent who you love and you trust and you assume that they're right and they know because they're your parent. You have a parent telling you, no, that's not who you are. That's not what you should be. That's not what you should do. But I feel like this is what I should do. Or how about the parents where you have a child, they say, go over there and give Uncle so-and-so or the friend a kiss. And the kid's saying, I don't want to, but they push them to do it anyway. So now you're teaching that kid not to trust themselves. Now you're teaching that kid that when I feel what I feel in me, that's wrong because you told me I should do this. You told me this is who I am. You told me how I should feel. You told me how I should move and how I should proceed. So it's just layer upon layer upon layer. So when we're talking about family ties in that context, many of us may get to be in our 30s. I don't talk about the lost decade with this because you still trying to find out who you are. You burning down villages and I bust the windows out your car. I'm talking about me. Not everybody did that.
Right, you definitely talking about you. I ain't busting no windows out.
I was close.
But by the time you get into your 30s, and now you're starting to realize a lot of the things that you've been carrying in existence that someone else gave to you, carrying labels that someone else gave to you, carrying on a belief system which has formed the way you think, the way you process, the way you interact, the way you have relationships. You've been taking all of what's pieces of what other people gave you with you throughout life. And now you're trying to build your career. You're trying to find out who you are. Your relationships are not working out. And then you get to a space where you're like, well, dang, I get to choose who I am. Why am I just accepting who somebody's told me I've been all this time? And then that's when you start to connect to these family ties. What am I going to do with this? That's what'll make us seek people outside of family who don't know all of that can just see us for who we are and where we are and support what they see right then and there, to have that validation. I think I'm dope at this. And somebody say, JC, yeah, hell yeah, girl, you are. Yes, do that. That's what'll make us go outside of the people that we know, to connect to family that can accept us for who we are, support where we are, and allow us the space to grow and still not look at us any differently because we're trying to figure it out, trying to make moves.
JC, you had such a facial expression. I'll let you respond to that first.
As Taralyn was speaking, it reminded me of when I met you, Billy.
Oh, I was like, Taralyn?
Let me clarify what I'm talking about. No, I recall one of our, interactions when maybe I had to be 15, when I was really, really young. And I remember that we would go off and we would just talk from our groups of friends. And you and I would talk, especially at Denny's. I remember sitting there and I remember you specifically saying, wow, you're nothing like your sister. And you've always treated me very different from her. And you were one of the first friends that I actually had who understood that though we were twins, we were completely different and we were not alike in any way. And you gravitated toward my personality more. And you've always kept it separate. You never lumped us together. For so long growing up, you would have thought my name was Jessica Jennifer. My mom still calls me that. My family members still call me that. They're like Jessica Jennifer. I'm like, y'all realize that I'm Jennifer, she's Jessica, and it is not one name. It's important to find people who understand you and can see you for who you are and not what your family has told you are supposed to be. Like you said, Taralyn, they tell you what you're supposed to be. And when you don't fit in that box, you end up growing up with a lot of resentment. And you don't know what to do with it half the time, right? Because you end up feeling like a failure. They wanted me to be an attorney. I'm a makeup artist. Granted, I'm a successful one, but I didn't do what they told me to do. And so it's like you end up resenting your family and wanting to spend less and less time with them. And you end up gravitating toward the people who supported you being a makeup artist because they didn't know you were supposed to be an attorney. They just saw you beating faces. And they was like, all right, girl, do your thing. You're good. And so you gravitate toward people who support you and support what you want to be. And then you just don't know where to put the family members who seem to be more judgmental or still want to compare you, because when I think about family, I think they constantly want to loop you back. It's almost like a cycle. They want to loop you. Remember to win, and you're like, I don't want to reflect on that because those weren't good times.
Right.
But it's trauma that keeps repeating itself over and over when you invite certain family members back who trigger trauma. I have a brother who every time I'm around him, all he wants to talk about is, how funny it was when we used to get whoopings. I don't want to talk about that anymore. Like, it's not funny to me anymore. I'm like, you realize I was child abuse though, right? And like, you want to keep laughing about it, but for me, it's more. Sure, I can see a little humor in it, but it's kind of serious. We were kind of abused, and I don't want to keep talking about that. Can we laugh about something else? But it's like he wants to keep going back. For me, it's a trigger. For him, it's memories. It's how we bond. We bond over beatings. How about that?
Yeah, I remember when your tooth flew over there in the corner.
Right, exactly. No, you about to get somebody beat up today because I'm strong enough to beat you up today.
I was like, I'm 9 and I was 9 and I'm 39 now. Where you at?
Think about that.
Right.
How often are you with family and all they're doing is talking about the embarrassing moments? I remember John used to pee in the bed, and remember we used to call you pissy draws, and like they want to do all the traumatizing over and over. Like they don't realize that like those are triggers for people, and that's what caused for little John to smoke crack. And y'all just want to keep bringing this up over and over, but it's like there's no concern for, we used to make fun of you growing up, and I'm really sorry, and I don't know how that made you feel calling you that. And I'm really sorry. I understand now it was a medical condition, or I understand now that you were being molested, and that's why you used to, it's like we don't go that deep. It's just all laughs and jokes. Oh, you was pissy draws, John. I'm over and over every reunion, and then we wonder why. Whatever happened to John? Not even don't come to our family reunions no more.
You know what else I learned about situations like that too? The ones who are leading that are usually the ones that are more traumatized than the people that they're talking about. If they're talking about you, then you're not talking about how Uncle Kenny, the child molester, got you first.
Absolutely.
How you were the one when you talk about me peeing in the bed. Well, you probably didn't get me, but you got Keisha because Keisha told us about you. If they're talking about other people, then they're not talking about themselves and the things that happen to them. Because when we have families with this type of dysfunction and trauma, no one is exempt. They
Right.
just have, you can have 10 people who were in the house at the same time, and everyone has their own story of trauma that day.
Mhm.
And the ones that their perspective of the things that were going on, everyone
Mhm.
has a different perspective because
Right.
everyone has a different space, a different existence, and a different story at that time. And so that's the thing that I noticed about people who, I actually had a aunt who used to do that all the time, and she caught me on the wrong day. I was going through some stuff. I
Oh man.
caught me on the wrong day. I was going through some stuff in my relationship, and it was a couple people in the room knew about it, because I had talked to them, and I was trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. And this was that aunt where I don't care what situation you were in. Not only was she negative, but the one thing she always wanted to do. Now she was anorexic all the time, my whole entire life that I can remember.
Wow.
Super super tiny, and that skinny meant beautiful to her. So
Oh wow.
that's what she did. And she used to indoctrinate her kids with that to the point where they were obsessed with it, not gaining a certain amount of weight. And so the one thing she always wanted to do was see somebody and talk about how big they were. Now we never talked about how you could stand a pork chop or 8. We never talked about that. But she was always the one who wanted to talk about somebody's weight all the time. And my weight wasn't even an issue, but she just caught me on the wrong day. And she come up with that, "Oh, well, you look like you gain weight." I said, "Well, you look like you withering away. Every time I see you, you look like you could stand to eat something, Auntie. When you gonna start eat? Have some of this pie, because they always coffee and stuff. They sit around the older folks. They had a coffee. Why don't you have some? They have mine. Everybody, give her pie. Where's the sandwich?" And I remember everybody just looking, and I was just like, really? I was like, I mean, we are freaking women. What woman wants to hear your hair is falling out, or you gaining weight, or that man of yours I saw out at such and such? We should all know you like 100. You should know what it is that a woman doesn't want to hear. But don't project your madness on me. We had that interaction one time. She never again saw me, and it was regular over the years. She do it everybody. She see me, she never say nothing to me like that ever. But I just learned from that day it was disrespectful. When I'm gonna sit up here and act like it was cool. A lot of the old people, you supposed to just let them talk and just whatever. Well, that didn't happen that day. But that day taught me that when you encounter that type of negativity, that's about that person. That
Mhm.
person has stuff to have. But when you're broken yourself, you don't see that like that. You take everything that they're saying personally. You take it at face value and you make it about you. But if somebody doesn't have darts, then they can't throw them.
Right.
Anytime you throwing darts is because you got them. And if you got them in you, that's your way of dumping as much as you can out of you onto somebody else. And it's just unfortunate that in our culture, within our families, I would say specifically Black families, because that's what I'm most familiar with, even though it's a lot of mixing going on in our family. But all of that, what happens behind closed doors, stays behind closed doors, and all of the silencing people, that doesn't allow for issues to be resolved, for you to be able to unpack before you're 30, for you to be able to make sense of, when they say mom or dad did the best that they can do, in many instances, yeah, that's true, but that doesn't change how their best could have made you feel your worst. How about we talk about that? But
Right.
there's not an open forum to be able to talk about that, because people are more interested in protecting their guilt rather than protecting their children, and giving those children who are living inside of adults what they need to be free and to move on, so you can break those generational curses and not perpetuate the same type of trauma over and over and over and over and over again.
Hmm. Hey, like you said, they got the right one today. That's that's what that's how it
I,
is sometimes. Because I
Yeah.
think sometimes the family tie or the family connection has those unspoken or unwritten rules of, they're the elder, you respect them. They're this, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna tell you, disrespect with me is probably one of my like fighting triggers.
You could
I
get
can
it.
do a lot of things and be like, it is what it is, whatever. And sometimes people can be disrespectful and I'll choose to walk away from that. But there are times where it's like, you're not going to disrespect me.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of things on this planet that don't involve me, or maybe involve me indirectly, but you're not going to directly disrespect me. That is just not something that I am comfortable with. And probably some of that is a trauma from being of the generation of, you were to be seen and not heard. You do what I tell you to do because I said so. Like all that stuff triggers me. So it's like, now I'm an adult and I got some mass behind me to make you respect me. If you feel like you think you can disrespect me, I can actually physically bring enough force to make you respect me. So that I understand that being a trigger and getting to that space where it's like, you know what, you've become really comfortable with being this disrespectful to everyone. Today, we're going to give you a taste of your own medicine because nobody's ever done that. To go back to the loop back in, JC, something you had said was the loop back in, where they continually revisit the trauma and revisit the trauma and revisit the trauma. I feel like some of that is, and it's toxic still, but some of that is to say that we come from the same cloth, we're cut from the same fabric. And sometimes in life, when you don't have your own accolades, we'll say, or your own achievements or your own successes, that you don't perceive your successes as successes, it's sometimes easier to look at a person that you do look up to and say, oh, but I remember when we were getting whoopings. Because that's your commonality. That is that connective tissue that says we came from the same place. So the value that I see in you, it's probably somewhere in me. I just haven't connected to it yet. So all I have is this one similarity memory.
It's the leveling tactic.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. You're so far up. Let me bring you down. Remember when you peed on me?
Right.
Remember that? Miss Executive.
Exactly.
Miss Makeup Artist to the stars.
That's what it is.
And it loops us back and loops us back and loops us back.
Yeah.
In a sense to keep us humble, but also in a sense for the other person, and it's not always the case, but for the other person in a sense to say, you could be this too. You just either don't want to, whatever excuse you want to give yourself, you just don't want to, you haven't done what you need to do to get there yet. And so it says that if you coming from a family of four, or with four siblings, or three siblings counting, and four counting you, it says that, well, if she came from this and she's where I see her at today, I came from the same thing, so I could be there too. And really, that's a true statement, but it's not necessary to loop me back into the toxicity of our family history. It's not necessary for you to be disrespectful about viewing my weight and calling my weight out to loop me back into the family. If you want to loop me back into the family in the most healthiest way I can think of, all you have to simply say is, I'm so proud of you for what you've done, knowing where we came from. The end. That's it. You have done something that I am proud of to call you my family. That's it. And so when I think about these family ties and how we get looped back in, and going back, Taralyn, to when you're talking about wanting our children to play sports because we played sports. My father was a phenomenal athlete, football, baseball. I don't think he played soccer because they weren't playing soccer in the hood back then. But if there was soccer in the hood, I'm sure he would have been phenomenal at soccer too. He's just a phenomenal athlete, track. He just a machine when it came to sports. And then to have this son, I'm his second son, but I have his name, I'm a junior. To have this son who goes around the same neighborhood you grew up in saying, oh, I'm Billy Wroe. People are like, oh, you're Billy Wroe's son? What do you play? Nothing. I play inhaler because I have asthma. That's what I play.
Play the piano.
I did play the piano, but like to have my father's legacy precede me and the expectation be that I was an athlete. Yeah. One thing, my father didn't get everything right, but one thing he got right was he never push sports on me. He never was like, well, you got to get out there and play. I'm sure there was times when I joined the football team, he was like, oh, he's going to play football. And then I was like, oh, they want me to quit my job? Nah, I'm cool. I'm going to go ahead and quit this football thing because I'm trying to make money. But there was never a time where he forced that love of sports onto me. Now, there's been plenty of times where he's told me stories about, his miraculous touchdowns and all that stuff. Plenty of times. And those are enjoyable moments, but they're enjoyable for me because of the fact that he never tried to force that, like, and you can have miraculous football touchdown moment. He never did that. And so I think it's one thing to see an ability in your child. I see abilities in all of my children. Like, man, they have the potential to do this. My youngest son is a brilliant child, like just a brilliant kid. And I see his curiosity and see how he would do very well in science. And so I do things or put him in programs that will allow him to explore that. But at no point am I like, you have to be a scientist. Be a scientist. You only look at science things. You want to read a book? It has to be science. You want to color something? It has to be science. I just give him the opportunity to explore those things. And if he decides he wants to go into science with those activities, great. If he decides, hey, I don't want to go do fossil digging anymore, or I don't want to go to the museum anymore. If he decides those are his decisions to decide. And I allow him to make those decisions and then help guide him towards what he feels his identity may be. But a lot of times I think you're right, is that sometimes as parents, we are so hell-bent on the identity that we see that we cannot deviate from anything other than what we perceive for it to be. And the reality is at the end of the day, these kids are going to grow up. They're going to spread their wings. They might fall out the nest and hit the ground and then get up and fly, but they're going to do things that work for their journey, and we have to respect their journey. I'm not saying let your kids run wild, because I don't believe that kids can be authoritative over themselves. They just don't have the mental capacity to do so at such a young age. However, give them that room or that space to make mistakes. Give them that room or that space to say, hey, look, my middle son, he's bringing in bad grades right now. However, I believe he's an intelligent child. But I'm not going to be like, I know that you're intelligent, so even though you're bringing in bad grades, I'm going to put you in gifted and honors classes. No, I'm going to let you be in the place where you're at, where you're struggling, and continue to let you know that I believe in you, but it doesn't matter what I believe. At the end of the day, it's going to matter what you believe. And if you believe that you don't need to graduate high school, then guess what? We're going to find out how far that belief gets you when we get to the finish line, and then we can compare beliefs and see which one works out best for you. But I'm not going to be this person who is constantly trying to force my belief of his intelligence down his throat and be like, you should be a scholar. Your father is a deep thinker. Why aren't you a deep thinker? I'm not going to do any of that stuff. So I thought about that in both of your comments, the looping back, and then also the just the wanting to project identities onto our kids. And so I ask you both this question: when it comes to these family ties, how can we, in a healthy manner, make the decision to release some of these ties? Because that was what both of you guys said in the beginning was, hey, are we keeping this tie or not? How do we make that healthy decision to release those ties before we get to the space where they meet us on the right, they get the right person on the wrong day?
JC, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, sometimes it's inevitable. Sometimes everybody can just get it. But I do believe that for me, for my journey, for my path specifically, I had to go through it. Meaning I had to be frustrated, be mad, curse some people out, get beside myself, fall out before I really came to the realization that I needed to start seeing my family as kids. So that's one of the techniques that I use a lot when someone says something that triggers me, is I find the kid in them. And I think what had to happen, what sequence of events had to happen to that child for that child to grow up to be this adult. It helps me to be more empathetic and compassionate toward them, specifically my parents, whom I just did not understand. I don't even know why they had kids. My mom said she wanted kids, but I didn't see it. it was really hard for me to forgive her because for someone who really wanted to be a mother or said that she wanted to be a mother, she was not the best at it. And there was a lot of damage done. And I was angry for a long time. And then something in me was like, you got to see the kid in her. And I started imagining my mother as a child, as a small child, and had to imagine what had to have been said to her, what had to have been done to her for her to become the mother that she was. And then when I decided to talk to her again, I had to set boundaries, and I mean strict boundaries. Listen here, my name is Jennifer. Don't be calling me Jessica, and don't be calling me Jessica Jennifer. It's just Jennifer. She was like, oh, and I had to tell her how the things that she said to me or the things that she did to me, how they made me feel. And I was
Yeah.
like, please allow me the space to get this off my chest and to get to the end to relay this to you. And then after I'm done, you can say everything you have to say to me. And she did. And she's like, a lot of things that she said, it's like for me, I'm thinking, how could you not realize that you were damaging me? But for her, she's like, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing because she was so caught up in her own situation, in her own depression, in her own mind, that what she was doing was not intentional. It was just like, hey, I got 4 kids. I'm a single mom, and I'm stressed the heck out. So for her, it was like, hey, everybody could get it, but she didn't realize, what lasting effect that would have on her children.
Yeah.
And once I was able to have that conversation with her and say, when we talk, these things are off limits. I can talk to you about these things, but I can't go here with you. These things are just off limits because she doesn't seem to understand the severity of those things. And so I'm just like, let's just agree that that's off the table. And so now, respectfully, when she starts joking and reminiscing and going back, there are times when I say, we're not going there. And she goes, oh, okay. And we'll leave it alone and we'll move on to something else. It's like we can have a relationship and we can talk, but there are certain things that you don't really get them 100% yet, so we can't joke about them yet. Once you get it all and we're good, then we're good. But I believe that you have to put people where they fit in your just because they're family doesn't mean that they're allowed all access to your life at all times with all conversations. And so that's what helped me, was to have those personalized conversations, and then hearing my parents' stories, hearing my father's story, which was a terrible story, but he created the monster that he became. And he's
Yeah.
aware of it. He's just like, that's what my parents made, a monster. So that's what y'all had, was a monster. And it's like, I respect the honesty, but man, it's a hard pill to swallow to know that your parents weren't just your parents. They were someone else's kids and somebody else didn't take care of them.
Mm.
That's so important what you just said, because to every child in childhood, the only thing that they know and that matters is their experience, what they got, and it's not being selfish. You're a kid. That's the only thing that's supposed to matter to you. What
Right.
your experience is, what you want, what you didn't get, who you wanted that extra hug from that went right over you and hugged the next person,
Mm.
whether or not you were seen, supported, heard. That's all kid. When I say babies, because you are all through that whole entire through high school, just a bunch of freaking babies with a couple hairs here and there on their chin and boobs that still hurt if they fall down or something. They're babies. So that it's crazy, because that's the stuff where when you get to be an adult and you may be standing there 35 having this conversation, but that's a 7-year-old girl talking to you right now that's looking for those answers, and to get, wow, I didn't know I was going through what I was going through, and this happened to me with my mother. You like, wait a minute, what are we? You're diverting. You feel like you don't. It's crazy, but that's one of the things that makes me say, as a coach, is that we have to release people from having control over our emotions. Forgiveness is something that you choose to give yourself. A lot of the times, we make forgiveness contingent upon what someone else does.
Hmm.
We can move forward if they would this, or if I tell you this and you understand, or if we have this conversation. I'm not expecting anything specific, but I'll know when I get it if it's what I need to close this and throw it into the sea of forgetfulness. I had to learn, and a lot of times I'm working with clients where they have to learn that we have to take back our power. We have to choose to give that to ourselves. No, with nothing from no one else. No expectations. And it's hard. It is a journey. And I've had spaces where I thought that I was beyond something. And then something, I mean, I'd be 10 years sober from throwing them hands. And then all of a sudden, something is said. It could be a song to play, and somebody standing there looking a certain way. And I'm like,
you don't want no problems.
Embarrassed about pulling your hair up. I'm like, I thought I was past that, but it's crazy how these things can happen. But yeah, JC, that was so good. That was such a good point. Such a good point.
I was going to say really quick, that was an amazing point, JC, in the sense of as much thinking as I do, I have never thought about the space that someone else was in their childhood. In the sense, like I could think about JC, I could think about Taralyn in their childhood because we're of the same peer group. But in thinking about my parents and how they raised me, I didn't even get beyond the scope of what their childhood might have been like. And it's specifically from my father's side, where we're very temperamental on that side of the family. And I don't mean temperamental as in sad. We temperamental as in violent on that side of the family. So to be on that side of the family, but then to think, because I had a very small window of interaction with my grandparents from my father's side of the family, to think of the violence that they engaged in when they were adults and my father was a child. It's like, no wonder this is being carried from generation to generation to generation to generation, because there is now a space in me where I've had to learn to just not say anything, because I'm a wordsmith. I forget the Japanese sword maker, but the Japanese sword maker who makes the prestige swords, boy, being these words, they are very razor sharp if I choose to let them be. So I've learned to sometimes just say, focus on the actions. Don't say much, because it doesn't take a lot to wound with words. And so like, I've never even thought about it. Now it's going to be something that an exercise that I go through about, like, I grew up as Little Bill, but before there was Little Bill and my father was Little Bill, what was his experience like? My mother, what was her childhood like? And really try to combine what that picture is to how they raised me, and how I got to where I am, and how I can try to sculpt or curb my experience as a child to give my children a better experience in their childhood. Now, one of them, they're already 20. It's too late. Hey, you got what I gave you. But but the other ones, as they are still minors and still growing, it gives me another tool to put into the tool belt to really look at how we become the adults that we are today. I'm sorry, Taralyn, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this who hasn't already, if you open that door for your parents to be able to just sit down and tell you about what their childhood was like, and this exercise, it's something that you have to go into it selfless. There's your experience that you had, but for the purposes of this conversation, if you're listening for there to be an explanation for you, or make it could come off like they're giving excuses. No, they're not. They were human beings before you were thought of, And so if you're going to do this exercise, go into it as though you're doing a research paper. And you're trying to get information to put together a story. And so if you condition your mind that I have what I have and what I need, but for the purposes of this, I want to get to know, for example, my mother's name is Lornay. I don't want to get to know Mama. I want to get to know Lornay. They used to call her Nay, the little girl that was born with the blonde hair. I want to get to know her all the way up until Taralyn came to be. It's actually very interesting, and stuff like that is how you're able to, or how you could be. It definitely was something that worked for me, and not so much with my mom, but with my dad. It was one of those types of things that helped me to be able to just let go of stuff. It's not even a past. It's just what they say with parents is absolutely true, and that is they can only give you what they have. And if they don't have it, if I say, JC, before we leave this show tonight, I'm gonna need you to give me the keys to my car so I can leave. Well, you don't have you can't give them to me. You in Houston. How you gonna do that? So if we're talking about something in that regard, it makes total sense. But then when we're thinking about parents and trauma, we don't tend to think about that like that. And some people just either want to pay their parents back, or they're just so angry that they don't want to hear their stories. We need to be open to hearing those stories, because in understanding those stories, not only is there freedom for us, but like Billy said, you have tools to work on with your kid. Billy, your son that's even 20, what he doesn't have, he doesn't have, but any deficits that he may have taken with him, even still, that perspective is something that's good to have. But to your question, um, about family ties, how would you move forward from them? For me, I used to be one that was always looking for answers, overly analytical. I needed to understand it. You need to be able to explain it to me. Because listen, yo, I remember when you such and such, you said that don't make no sense. I wanted to break it down. I was that person. But what really freed me from things like that is I had turned into a victim in the situation. And as long as I could point fingers at a bunch of other things and people that happened that held some kind of reason as to why I was angry, or as to why I was this or why I was that, as long as other people were involved, I stayed stuck. So moving forward for me had everything to do with me removing everything outside of me and focusing on me. I needed to learn how to trust me. And I needed to learn how to, because out of everything that happened with everybody else, the common denominator in the middle of it was me. I got to choose, irregardless of what happened to me. I got to choose what I was going to do to proceed forward. So I think a lot of the times, even in working with clients, when we're talking about trauma and things from the past and we're talking about family, we wouldn't be talking about it if we were not bound in some way. And one has to choose to be bound by those things. And so moving forward begins with you. Trusting myself was huge for me, because so much doubt was implanted in my mind about what I was capable of, who I should be, how I should proceed. The comparison thing that JC talked about, there were so many different layers. And so at the end of the day, I had to choose whether or not I believed it. And if I had bought into it, but I didn't believe it was true, then what was I going to actively do in my life to disprove what I bought into and to prove what I feel is my truth? What can I do to realize that? And that's something that requires movement. That's not going to happen and you're sitting still. So if you trust yourself, then you're going to make the moves, because sitting still means that I'm continuing to buy into what I've been indoctrinated to believe, even though it doesn't feel right. It doesn't align with me. And so that's what the space was for me.
Girl,
can I add one that was so deep? I want to add one thing that I thought of before I lose it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Taralyn, when you were talking, you just reminded me that when you sit down and you have those conversations with your parents, what's also super important to remember is that Big Mama and Granddaddy wasn't always the same Big Mama and Granddaddy that you remember. So
Come on.
Because you think about it, when by the time grandbabies come, they've changed, 40 times over. They're not fighting people in the street anymore. They're not killing people. They're not doing drugs anymore. You know what I mean? They're not for the streets. They sitting on a couch and they read newspapers. So you think of sweet old grandpa and sweet old mama who always got the fried chicken in the kitchen for you, making sure that her grandbaby eat. That sweet woman wasn't the same sweet woman that your mama or your daddy encountered.
When
so
she
you
drug your mama down the stairs or something, right? Different mama.
Have to take what you think you know about your family and put it aside for a moment, because the mama and the pawpaw that they're about to tell you about ain't the ones that you experienced.
Yeah, right. You've never met them. You about to meet them, and you can't. And it's crazy because they got the little hair tied up in the gray bun with the net on and wearing the with the stockings. She wasn't wearing stockings back in the day. Listen, her skirt was shorter than yours. That's how she tell you to put your skirt down.
Right.
For the streets. You hear me? But it's hard to see them in anything other than the soft-spoken grandparents.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
once the angry parents before they became the soft-spoken grandparents. So we forget that when we think about our parents, because we see their parents now as they are in their 80s, 70s, and 80s, as we
Right.
remember them. But we forget that they were at one point 20 with 7 kids, trying to feed 7 kids in a 2-bedroom house. Ma'am,
Exactly.
somebody getting stomped out.
And grandpa coming from across the street. Where you supposed to be over here. You to come from the mill. Where your check at? You know,
Oh, baby.
you coming from Sissy house.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a different world. So we got to see everything in context. You know what I mean?
Right. True.
To really appreciate it.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Well, we are almost at time. Dang, that hour flew by.
It always does when we get together. We got JC. You knew it was going to happen when you started the show and you said, "Well, we have a smaller panel." I was like, but I'm thinking to myself, it's potent though. So I mean,
Right.
Small but mighty.
Right. We don't need all that.
But yes, I will give. I think I'll give my closing thought, and then we'll move from my left to right. So I have Taralyn and then you, JC. No pressure.
Exactly.
But really, from today's conversation on family ties, it really is about, I think, Taralyn, you said it best, from removing ourselves from this victim mentality to where life is happening to us. Our family, you get the family that you get, blood family, you get what you get.
Yeah.
If you didn't marry or somebody didn't make a connection where your family is millionaires or where your family is emotionally intelligent or whatever, you get what you get. And so those family ties are really about, at some point, it's no longer you get what you get. It's you get what you choose. And being willing to let go, being willing to tie tighter, and being willing to repair. I think about shoelaces when they used to have those little plastic tips. I don't even know if they have them on them now. But
Right.
little plastic tips, and I would always get pro wings, so my little plastic tips would fall apart real quick. But out of all the tips, I remember sometimes we weren't in a financial position to get more shoes, but we were in a position to get more shoelaces. And so being able to repair some of those family ties, in order to repair them, I believe that you have to get to this place of resolution. And resolution, I think, comes from things that everybody have shared today, from whether it's looking at your parents and the childhood that they may have had, to understanding, Taralyn, like you said, understanding that these things are things that I am choosing and no longer choosing these things because I'm not going to be a victim to them anymore. At some point, we have to find resolution, and being okay to, if that resolution is releasing the tie, repairing the tie, or tightening the tie. That's what I'll close with.
Love that. I think I would add to that because, yeah, that's real good. I would add to that our families are the most beautiful blueprint for life if we choose to look at them that way. And I say this because there isn't a personality within your family that you will not encounter times a million out in the real world. If you can master those personalities closest to you, and it's easier for us to do, believe it or not, with people that we know because there's an emotional component there. When we go out into the real world, once we're adults, you're selective about who you decide to have that emotional connection with. So those circles are rather small. Everyone else outside of that is a superficial acquaintance or business transaction, or maybe just somebody that you know socially. So my point is if you can master the most difficult personalities that you have entrenched history and emotional ties with, it makes you one of the best people in the world to be able to use community and the social structure that God deemed necessary for us to be able to connect to others, to further whatever your goal may be in life, be it business, be it a marriage, be it any type of relationship. And not only with you being able to flourish within those relationships, for you to be able to stay whole and intact, and you're not able to be pulled and swayed emotionally by what somebody is or isn't. So they're the perfect blueprint and practice for everything that we need to have built within us in order to make us better people who control the climate of who we are, and in fact can take that energy and climate and decide to spill it on the room and make it what we want it to be in a positive place, because in a positive way, because I think that we're all meant to make a positive impact. But a lot of us run from the challenges of the people closest to us, when it's not that you have to lock arms with everybody in your family that you don't agree with. Some family members you feed with a long handled spoon, but you can still find a way to navigate those relationships with your communication and controlling your energy and the climate of the circumstances around you. You can still learn to do that in such a way where it makes you so proficient out in the world and impenetrable. If you can master your family, can't nobody F with you. Right. When it comes to that, we have to look at that way. We don't have to, but I think that it's fruitful for us to look at that blueprint that way and use it that way throughout our life.
JC, what are your
I don't have anything. Again, every time I want to say something, Taralyn takes the words right out of my mouth each and every time.
We're here.
All my life, got to prove my love. I would, again, I'll just piggyback on what Taralyn said and maybe add that the most important, if you can master your family, you absolutely can master the world. That's a fact. But understanding what you will and will not tolerate, understanding what triggers you,
yes,
understanding what is healthy. If being around your family is you're unable to do so without becoming extremely emotional, then you really need to work on yourself first and figure out how you can get to a place of forgiveness where people are still allowed to be themselves, but you are not triggered in the sense that you want to throw hands at the family barbecue because this is so called you something or said something to you. But if you work on yourself, you work on your triggers, you work on understanding people, and you have a little bit more empathy, then you can understand where people are coming from. And emotional intelligence is extremely important. Not only are you supposed to use this in the business world or interacting with strangers, but it also helps when you're interacting with family members, because these people are family members to you, but they're strangers to someone else. And you expect for someone else to use a little emotional intelligence when dealing with your family member, right? So why is it that you won't use a little emotional intelligence when you're dealing with them? And maybe pull them aside or have a one-on-one and really talk to them and see if you can come to some understanding. And if you can't, and they're like, this is just the way I am, you too sensitive, you need to grow tougher, thicker skin. Okay, that's fine. And you know where you can put this person, you know what you can tell this person, you know what they're going to say, but you won't allow it to trigger you. You can just kind of laugh it off and say, under your breath, that's why I don't fool with you. But we're gonna have a good time at the barbecue and let it just roll off your back. I think with family, we don't let it roll off our back, but with strangers, we will. We'll walk away from a stranger, but with family, for some reason, we got to prove something, right? That we're the toughest, or we're not going to take it. You ain't about to bully me. And I would say try to use that same emotional intelligence that you use every day at your job or your place of business, and apply that to your family members and see if you can understand them a little bit better. Because you can't fix them, but you can fix you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love
Yes.
it. All right. So with that, as you always know, at the end of these, we have the coach's playbook, and I'm on the right. The last week, about 2 weeks ago, I was on the wrong thing. So we had Wednesday word tools, but this week we got coach's playbook tools. So these are tools that are notes that I'm taking as we're going through the conversation. Tonight, the very first tool that we got came from Taralyn about trusting your instincts about your connections. And it goes back to you talking about being that child who didn't want to do something and being told that you had to do it anyway. It's almost like practicing not trusting your own instincts. And so get back into that habit of trusting your instincts about the connections and the ties that you have. Be willing to tie tighter, repair, or sever the tie. From the coach's playbook, tool number 2 is it's okay to sever ties to resolve trauma. Going back to just even what you were saying about emotional intelligence, JC, emotionally intelligent people understand that sometimes there is no changing other parties, and all we can do is change ourselves. And that may require us to sever the tie that is an unhealthy tie, whether it's family or friends, no matter. But if the tie is unhealthy, be willing to sever it. Tool number 3 also comes from JC. Set boundaries.
Yes.
I just did a Wednesday word a couple weeks back on health. I think it was setting healthy boundaries or something like that. And one of the things it was that it's never too late to establish a boundary. Never too late. I don't care what has been acceptable all the way up until this point, but the minute I set that boundary, to use your word, Taralyn, going forward, this is what it's going to be. So if you don't want the smoke going forward, understand this boundary and you won't get the smoke. But I think that that's really an important thing, is establishing boundaries that support the ties that you want to have. And then I actually have a bonus tool here, and this came from you, Taralyn. The ties that we have, they cannot give us what they do not have. No matter how much you love the person, no matter how thick blood is over water, at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't have something to give you, they cannot give it to you. It is impossible for them to do so. Maybe later they can acquire it and give it to you at a later time. But if in the present, because that's the only thing that we get to deal with is the present, they don't have it to give, be willing to accept that they don't have it to give and adjust the tie accordingly. And then, first time ever, we got an exercise here. We're going to call this exercise Open Up Your Parents' Childhood.
Oh,
exercise.
yeah.
Brought to you apart by JC and Taralyn Michelle.
I love
Definitely, I would recommend taking some time, if your parents are still on earth, living, breathing, taking some time to have a conversation with them and open up their childhood, to understand not only how they became the parents that you had, but what poured into that. What are some of the good habits that they brought and what are some of the bad habits that they brought? And then turn around and open up your childhood and see what you may need to filter out. We'll call it filter out. But that is a first time Taralyn Michelle and Billy Wroe live in exercise. So we're not going to call it homework, but you know, if you do your homework, typically you get better grades on the test. Just saying. So that's what I have for you tonight. As always, thank you very much, JC, for joining us, whether you're joining us in the live chat on video or you're joining us in the chat with comments. I greatly appreciate you being here with us this evening. And I don't know why. How would I forget this part of the show? I'm not forgetting that. Anyway, if you want to see more of content that we have coming down the pipeline, please join us tomorrow, actually, on the first row for the Wednesday Word. That is at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Always a great topic to talk about, and there's also more tools that you can get. And then on Friday, you can catch us, well, not us, but you can catch Taralyn Michelle on the Grind to Find podcast, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm telling you, the shows are fire. You get them anywhere that you would stream a podcast. You can listen to it anywhere you would stream a podcast. And then you can catch us here next week for another episode of Taralyn Michelle and Billy Wroe Live, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All these time zones that I'm adjusted in my head on the fly. And then, as always, you can contact us on social media, anywhere on Facebook, Instagram, or even on YouTube for Taralyn Michelle at The Grind to Find, and you can catch me at firstrow.com. Other than that, oh, yeah, I have a book.
that part.
I have this thing called a book. Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion. Tell you, it is a life-changing book, not in the sense of it's life-changing information, but in the sense of how it works the reader through thinking intentionally about their life and their experiences. And that's what I mean when I say life-changing. Get the copy of the book. Go to firstrow.com. Get your copy of the book and the journal, because you can get a journal with it. And if you're questioning whether or not the book is for you, you can download the first chapter of the book on the website for free. It's the entire chapter. If you don't like that chapter, then you probably won't like the book, so then don't get the book. But I think you'll like the chapter because it's going to drive you to think deeply about your experiences. But other than that, that's all we have for you this evening. Again, thank you, JC, for joining us. Love having you in the chat. And I talk to you every day anyway, so it's another conversation for us. And until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for joining us this evening.